everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's Kai and it is finally spooky season. So this is going to be my first of hopefully 2 Halloween nail designs, and it is inspired by the Silent Hill F game that just came out recently. This is not sponsored, though I would absolutely love to be. I just really like the story of the game and the setting and really wanted to do it justice with a nail design, and I thought, what a perfect way to honor it than with some Halloween themed claw nails. Halloween season is my absolute favorite, so I'm so excited to see all of the spooky nail art designs. Speaking of which, some of you know that I recently became a Sweetie Nail Supply ambassador, and they are currently hosting a Halloween art contest. So if you have some of their products already and you like nail art and you're interested in winning some awesome prizes, definitely go check that out on their Instagram. It is open through the 31st, and then they'll announce the winners afterwards. And up for grabs are some of the new fall collections like the inks or the yogurt nail pumpkin candy set. Sweetie Nail Supply has honestly added so many new brands recently onto their website. I, of course, spent way too much already than I should have, so be on the lookout for a haul coming soon. And if you would like to support my spending habits, you can always use my code GETPRESSED for 10% off everything on the website. But I think that's plenty of announcements for today, so thank you as always for being here. If you are not subscribed, please consider doing so if you enjoy nail art tutorials, guides, hauls, all that fun stuff. But without too much more chit-chatting, let's get into the video. Okay, so this is my design for the Silent Hill F inspired claw nails. I've already seen 2 different creators play all the way through the game. I've seen all of the endings, and I really like the disjointed storytelling. I'm also chicken though. I cannot play scary games myself, so I like watching other people play. One of the main inspos is this cosplay of Sakuko from Lightning Cosplay. She is amazing. They make such cool detailed cosplays. I mean, look at this. Everything is from hand, all the prosthetics. I just absolutely love watching their process, so highly recommend checking out her video on how she made this. I also really wanted this character to be in the forefront of the design because I love the fox mask that he's wearing. And then these are just some concept art for the game. It is set in like 1960s Japan, I believe, and it's in a rural village, and I love this sort of gross combination of florals mixed with like this fleshy fungi type of growth that's spreading throughout the town. That's really exemplified in this character here, where you have that mix again of like flesh and all sorts of mutated growth mixed with the beautiful florals. I just think that's such an interesting concept with the contrast there. Super cool. So here's the design I came up with. This, by the way, is my updated claw nail template with the top-down view as well. If you're interested, it'll be linked. If you are looking for a 10-finger template though, I will also leave Hope from Nails Box of Hope, her coffee, down in the description. She has a top-down and side view template for all 10 claw nails. So for the thumbnail, I knew I wanted to include the fox mask, so I'm thinking I will 3D sculpt that fox mask and use a mold that I've been dying to use, which is of a spider lily, and try to embed both in the actual claw itself. We'll see how it goes because I'm gonna have to sculpt this really small, and I'm not sure I'll be able to achieve it, but that's the thought. Do a milky white base and then kind of like a foggy, smoky marble at the tip. Spoiler alert, if you haven't played the game, there is a fog monster as like the main antagonist that creates a lot of mist, which is very characteristic of the Silent Hill games. So I wanted to incorporate that into the design. So the pointer finger is going to be based off of Sakuko, and I wanted to do her robes. I believe it's called a Chihaya, her ceremonial outfit. I wanted to emulate the pattern on it by hand painting the florals and do like a bloody tip at the end. And then I also wanted to include an actual red string to mimic the one that ties together her Chihaya. And then for the middle finger, I'm mostly basing this off of like that idea, the concept of flesh and gore mixed with florals. So I have this idea. I want to do guts embedded in the claw itself, and then do some little like floral petals and do some hand-painted flowers on the surface of the nail. We'll see if I can pull it off, but I think it'll look really cool if I'm able to. For the ring finger, I think it's better to see it top down. I want to embed a 3D spider lily. I do have a mold that I've been dying to use, and this is the perfect timing. And then I just want to add some like textured lines on the top. And then for the last nail, slight trypophobia warning, I do want to emulate a scene from the beginning of the game where one of the characters gets taken out in a really gross and brutal way where her blood is almost like pulled to the surface of her skin and flowers start blooming in the holes that are created. It is so disturbing, but in such a good way, very fitting for Halloween. So yeah, that is the overall design. Hopefully I can pull it off because I really want to do this game justice. But on that note, let's actually get into the supplies that I'll be using to make this design. Alright, so in terms of supplies, here's everything that I used. It will all be linked in the description down below. First off, I do use 2 different top coats. This one is the zombie top, it's just a thicker consistency. And then this one is the Mayo glass top, which is just a little bit thinner. For the spider lilies, I ended up using yogurt gels number 37, chili red. To create a marbled nail, I end up using the doughy marbly white ink. And then the base color on the press-on tips is the Divock Milkus white. It's one of my favorite milky white colors. For all of the blood effects, the Yogurt Nail Korea Tongulu Collection Black Cherry color is perfect. And then I do end up using 2 different matte top coats. This one is the Divock Zero Matte, a thinner matte top coat. And then this one is the Yummy Matte Art Gel. Realistically, you only need one though. And you will want some sort of rhinestone glue to affix the 3D elements. This is the Ivy Fix Gel. And then you will want some sort of thicker non-wipe gel paint. This is the Gina Nail Oil Paints in Burgundy and Ebony Black. I do use this mold from AliExpress. Honestly, I will link it, but I wouldn't recommend it. You'll see why in the video, but it's a spider lily mold. I picked up this red string from Michael's just in the embroidery section. And then for filling the dual forms, I end up using 2 of the Jinbei Coulier line. It's the thick and then the hold version. The thick is actually a little bit thinner than the hold version, and I wanted both viscosities for different reasons that you will see in the video. And for all my hand-painted details, I'm using my Pat Art Gel from Croissantionery, which will actually be available on Sweetie Nail Supply soon. I've used this thing so much lately and I absolutely love it. It's great for ombres, it's great for really pigmented painted details. And of course for the 3D elements, none other than the Classic Collection from Croissantionery. This set is currently available on Sweetie Nail Supply, and if you've been around the channel, you'll know that I've been using this almost since she launched over a year ago, and I'm just so happy to see her growth, honestly. In terms of tools, you will want some painting brushes. I love this mini oval brush from Gina Nail for filling the dual forms. I think it's the perfect size. I also really like her small liner, the milk tea one. It's great for petal shapes, a little bit on the thicker side. And then one of my favorite really super thin liners is the Diami short liner. And that's actually it for supplies, so let's jump into the nail design. Okay, so to avoid this video being too long, I'm starting with my nails already actually painted. This is 3 layers of Divock's Milkus. And then I went ahead and sized my dual forms based on the painted tips. If you want to see the whole process, I do recommend checking out my last claw video. I go over how to size and all of that there. But I wanted to start with the sculpting. So I'm using my favorite sculpting clays. These are the Croissantionery Classic Collection. And I'm so incredibly excited to announce that she and Sweetie Nail Supply are doing a collab. So you can buy this collection and some others on the Sweetie Nail Supply website. She just has top tier clays. I love them. So I actually had already custom mixed this brown color. I keep all my pre-mixed clays in just a spare palette. So I did go ahead and pull that out because I felt it would be perfect for the fox mask. I wanted to start there because I knew it would be the hardest element. So I took a brush handle that I felt would fit into the dual form because my original idea was to embed it. And I take my clay and I do kind of like mix it together just to soften it a little bit because it can be a little stiff if you haven't used it for a long time. And to get the like rounded mask shape, I'm actually going to sculpt it on the tip of a brush with a rounded shape. And you just want to flatten it over the handle till you get a disc. And then I'm taking a brush wet with some isopropyl alcohol and I'm just lifting up one edge of that disc. It creates this kind of like duck beak shape, and this is going to be the snout. Now, when I was molding this the first time, I realized I was getting some of the wrinkles from my glove into the clay. I used a little bit too much alcohol that just softened the clay too much for my liking, so I did start over. All in all, I think I had 4 attempts at this fox mask, and I'm really glad I started here because it alone took me, I think, 4 hours to do. On my second attempt, I thought maybe I could carve out the jaw and the cheekbones before going in and doing that like duck shape, lifting up the corner to create kind of like the snout portion of the fox. I did learn from this mistake though. I probably wouldn't recommend carving out the jaw first because it just made the snout too thin, not enough structural integrity. But I went ahead and tried to add the eyes. I started with a silicone tool and quickly realized it was too big, so I resorted to some pointed tweezers, and those actually worked great. So it was a process of just flattening, smoothing, using those tweezers to carve out that eye space. But then I got to the snout, and again, it was just a little too thin by this point because I had carved out those cheeks. So I'm starting again. And this time I went with the eyes first, taking what I had learned from all of the other iterations and applying it here. So I started with the eyes, made sure that they were nice and symmetrical, and then I lift up that one edge to create that snout shape. Started with a silicone tool, went in with a brush wet with some isopropyl alcohol. You don't want too much alcohol on your brush, otherwise the clay can become quite soft as it absorbs some of the water. I use 91% isopropyl alcohol, and I just try to use it sparingly. But as you can see here, it holds its shape super nicely. That is why I like Chrysoania's clays, is because they are like a true clay Play-Doh texture. So they hold in place as you're sculpting. So I went ahead and cured the base shape for 60 seconds, and now I'm just adding on some more definition. So I raised the nose bridge just a little bit with some extra clay, blending that out with the brush. Again, adding a little bit more to the tip of the nose, blending, curing as I go. And then it was time for the ears. So to do the ears, I sculpted them separately on a palette first, just by making a triangle and indenting the ear shape, the inner ear. And then I kind of like curved the edges around and then peeled it off the palette to stick to the already cured head. And then I'm just taking a silicone tool and I'm blending that still uncured clay into the cured head portion. I do think it's good to work in parts, curing as you go if you're happy with an overall shape. That way you can preserve what you really like and you don't have to redo it if you make a mistake with a different part. That's just how I personally like working. So once I was happy with that ear, I cured it and then moved on to the second. Same process, just kind of like rolling out a teardrop shape, indenting the center of it, curving the edges, and then sticking it to the head. Now, because this clay is so good at being non-sticky and you can really work with it, it can kind of like move around if you try to stick it to itself until you blend it. So my advice is just press it into the nail or whatever surface you'd like to apply it to, and then go in with some sort of implement wet with alcohol and give it a nice good blend around the edges, and then it should stay no problem. So I just make sure that I like the placement and it looks fairly symmetrical, and then I gave it a cure and then just filled in some gaps with more clay just to make everything look like it was all one piece rather than multiple little parts that have been put together. Now I sort of regret doing this directly on the brush because, as you can see here, I got a little bit of clay stuck on the handle, so I would recommend maybe wrapping your brush with saran wrap before attempting this method, or just using something else to sculpt around. And then tragedy struck, so I realized that the mask would not fit under this darn dual form. I made it a little bit too big, and that is a miscalculation I also make later in the video with another embed. So this will have to go on the surface of the nail, and actually I'm not unhappy about that with the final product. But after figuring out where I would want it placed, I go in and I just file down some of the back so it fits a little bit better. I just smooth out some of those edges, and again, see if I can get it to lay a little bit flatter since it's now going to go on the surface. This was also a good time to refine the shape, so I did go in and just make kind of like the cheekbone area just a little bit sharper to match the original inspiration slightly better. Another nice thing about the Chris clays is that they do cure rock solid, so you can file them down into shape. But after curing and wiping away all of the dust, I was honestly pretty happy with the final outcome. So I pulled out my art gel palette from Chrysoania, which it's not on the website right now, but it should be available on Sweetie Nail Supply soon. I know it sold out multiple times on her own website. which makes sense because you can use it for painting details like I do here. The colors are really, really, really pigmented because they're actually meant for doing ombre. I will show you that later, but for now, I just custom mixed a couple brown colors and I'm just adding some texture and some shading to the fox mask. If you like makeup, I'm doing kind of like regular makeup techniques. I'm contouring in the recessed areas, like around the ears, around the nose, around the eye sockets, and then I tried to use some lighter browns around the forehead and down the bridge of the nose to really bring out a bit of a highlight. This gel is quite thick because I think its primary function is for an ombre, but that does mean you can actually get some really nice painterly texture with it, especially if you're not putting too much on the brush and kind of like dry brushing it over some areas. So these are the final results and I'm really happy with it. So I went ahead and moved on to the next embedded element. Now this is a silicone mold. I think I got it off of AliExpress. And originally I thought I wanted to do this blood red color. It's 49 from Yogurt Now Korea's Tangulu collection. It's a really lovely deep jelly red. And the only issue with using it here was actually the mold itself. I would not recommend this mold. First of all, it's too cloudy to really cure anything from the backside. And I feel like the indents are almost too small to surface level because this thing cracked immediately when I tried to pull it out. So I tried doing it again, this time keeping more gel in the center, and it did come out, albeit I did lose some parts when I peeled it off and tried getting rid of some of the excess gel. You can see here that I just pull one of the petals off, so unfortunately, I would not recommend the molds. It does come out really pretty if you can get a clean demolding. But I also realized that I wanted a little bit of a brighter red for this, so I pulled out a solid color from Yogurt Now Korea. I actually have a whole 3D molds guide if you're interested in learning some of the different products you can use, some tips and tricks I have for filling them. All of those went out the window for this mold though because the silicone was pretty stiff, so it was kind of hard to spread out the pattern and get the gel in there. And then the design itself was super delicate and thin, so it couldn't really apply it in isolation. So I did my best to just kind of like clean up as much extra gel as possible. I did not do such a good job with that for this go, so you can see that there's a lot of extra gel there when I demold it. And I am struggling here. I'm trying to hold it apart so it doesn't crush the flower if I accidentally let go, and then also demold the flower at the same time. So I just took some cuticle nippers and tried to clip off as much of that excess as possible. And this was honestly really time consuming, so for my second attempt, I tried to be a little bit cleaner about my application and wipe away more of the excess. This one came out much better, so I am getting the hang of using this super intricate detailed mold, but on to the next element. So for one of the nails, I wanted to do the sort of like floral gutsy look that a lot of the monsters have. So I'm taking the Chris Classic clays and I'm mixing together some of the skin tone, some of the pink, and some of the brown to try to get like a good internal flesh color, which sounds awful, and I guess when you think about it, kind of is. I'm definitely going for like intestinal pink here, so I mixed in a little bit of red as well as more of that flesh color. And then I just roll it out into a gross little guts rope. This can be really imprecise. In fact, it's actually better if you have some areas that are thicker and some that are thinner to really get the look of like intestines or guts. Look, it's a Halloween set. It is what it is. But I took a dual form that was actually a size smaller than the nail that I wanted to embed this in. That way, once I cured it, I could remove it and ensure that it would fit into the larger size dual form for my actual nail. I learned this technique from dice makers. I love watching resin dice makers. They call this, I believe, a blind, where they'll do the embeds in that blind and then they'll put that in another mold that's slightly larger. So once I'm happy with how the intestines are looking, I fully cure that in the nail lamp. And then because these are dual forms, it just popped right out and I have a perfectly shaped embed that will fit inside the actual nail tip that I want to use for the press-on. So I stick that onto a nail stand and I'm going in with that black cherry color, which is the perfect syrupy blood color. And I'm just very messily painting this all over the intestines to give it that nice, juicy, gross, bloody look. Sorry if you're squeamish, but I absolutely love Halloween and everything horror. I can't do a lot of gore, but this amount doesn't bother me. So I stick that into cure and then I work on the petals that I want to add. So this is the Gina Nail oil paints. They are a thicker painting gel and it's non-wipe, which was perfect for this. So I paint on a couple little petals, just on a palette, something disposable. You don't want these to be too thick because we want to make sure that they cure all the way through. So I'm just doing thin layers and then curing it, and you can peel them right off and you have little handmade petals. I would have used real dried flowers, I just didn't have any pure red ones. And then I'm going to take the Ivy Fix gel and just glue these into the guts. Now the petals I'm using here, I actually did with a painting gel initially, but I liked the structure that the Gina Nail petals gave me, so that's why I showed you that version. But overall, I really like the look of this, how it ties together the florals with the gore and creates this sort of like beautifully disturbing imagery. And with that last embed done, we are ready to actually fill the dual forms. I'll be using the Gina Nail mini oval brush. I think it's perfect for these dual forms since they are on the slimmer side. And I'm actually going to be using the Jinbi Coulier Hold gel this time. If you saw my last video, I used mostly the thick version. The Hold version is just a little bit more viscous, holds its shape a little bit better, and since I knew I was going to be mostly building these nails all in one go, I'm not like layering in a layer, curing it, adding another layer. No, I'm fully filling the dual form with the embeds or with whatever design, and then applying the nail tip and building it all at once. So I wanted something that just had a little bit more sturdiness to it. The thumbnail I want to be marbled to create the kind of like mist effect that is so prevalent in the game. So I take some alcohol ink, this is the doughy marbly white, and I just dab that over the uncured gel. And then I take a metal implement and I'm just swirling it through, trying to kind of like push into the gel itself to get some depth to the swirl. If you feel like you're losing too much of the white, you can add a little bit more ink. Just keep constantly checking from the side to make sure that you're happy with the swirl and that you don't over mix the gel. In hindsight, I probably would have done this in 2 layers, just to make sure that that white ink really got to the bottom and or in this case top of the dual form, but that's why I experiment with these things and then share my findings with you all. But I take my nail tip and I press it into the dual form and then I give it a nice flash cure before I then put it in my full-size lamp to cure. And then it was on to the next nail, which this one is just going to be clear because I'm going to paint over the entire surface, so it doesn't really matter what color was underneath. I will say though, you want to make sure that you are using a very transparent gel. I wouldn't even recommend like a syrupy gel or a colored builder for the whole dual form because it's not going to be able to cure all the way through. So I'm just using straight clear for this, filling up the dual form and then pressing the tip in and flash curing before full curing. For the middle finger, which has the guts, I did decide to use a slightly thinner consistency builder, so this is the thick version of the Coulier gel, not the Hold, and that's because I needed something that would flow into all of those like crevices and cracks around the intestines without causing too much air bubbling. So I press in the intestines and then I go in with more gel and just make sure everything is nice and covered, that there aren't too many bubbles. I lay in a few additional petals, and then I realized I had a problem. So I add the necessary amount of gel to fill the rest of the form, and then I go to press in my press-on tip. In hindsight, when I was originally molding this, I should have made sure that the side walls weren't too big because as you can see here, my press-on tip is not sitting in the dual form correctly because my embed was a little bit too big. So I had to leave some gapping around the edges just to get it to fit, which is fine. I'll fill those in later. I'm filling them in some here right now. It just means I'm gonna have to do more shaping afterwards. So lesson learned, on to the next one. Now I somehow lost all the footage of the ring finger, but I do have this footage of a mistake I made with the pinky finger. For some reason I forgot that I wanted to do mist here, and so I thought I would do some marbled blood. So I swirled in some black cherry from Yogurt Nail Korea, and honestly, it looked so cool. I'm almost kind of disappointed I don't end up using this in the final design, but I might actually just make a whole set of claw nails that look like this. Just because they're simple to do, really fast, you just take a liner brush and kind of like push and swirl that gel into the clear. and it looks awesome. My frustration here though is that I would have to redo the whole nail again because I really want the fog effect to be on the pinky finger with the like blood pustules. So instead of an ink, I decided to experiment this time with a milky white. This is the Divock Milkis color that I use as the base of the press-on tips. Same process, I took a liner brush and just kind of like poked that color into the uncured gel. If you want to try this, I might recommend using instead an opaque white. I think it needed just a little bit more pigmentation. It's a little bit too subtle here, but there was no way I was going back and doing this a third time. So I kept it the way it was. It does still look cool. I just think it would look a little bit more punchy with an opaque white. But those are all of the forms applied to the press-on tips. And now for the fun part, the removal. And these do pop off really easily, but then they do need shaped afterward. So I'm just wiping away the tacky layer. I will say the Jinbei Coulier has quite the tacky layer. So you do want to cleanse it before you do any sort of filing or anything like that. And then I remembered I had that gapping where the dual form wasn't exactly fitting, so I just filled that in with a brush. Just adding a little bit of extra gel here. It's okay if it's not entirely smooth because we will go in and file it down to shape. Just make sure that you have enough gel there to cover the gaps, the holes. Again, cleansing with some isopropyl alcohol and a lint-free wipe before I start the filing process. Now, the first thing I file down are the sidewalls, just in case there was any gel that kind of like creeped over the edge of the dual form and caused some bumps, any sort of ridges. I just make sure the sidewalls are nice and smooth. And then I'm going in with a drill that's relatively new to me. It's a soft gel drill. It is carried by Sweetie Nail Supply. It's definitely one that's more geared towards professional. It is quite pricey, but I can understand where the price comes from when you consider that all of the components are metallic, they're not plastic, and it's quite frankly the smoothest drilling experience I've had. Like, there's little to no vibration in the hand unit when you're drilling. So I'm just taking a ceramic bit here. This one is a little bit of a finer grit because I don't want to grind down the edges too quickly. I want to make sure I can maintain that nice sharp claw shape. So I'm just running it over the underside of the nail to make sure those curved edges stay nice and curved, nice and smooth, that I'm taking down any extra gel that might have pooled over. And then I'm also making sure if there were any lumps or bumps from where I had too much of the product underneath, that I file that down to be nice and flush with the press-on tip. This is the strategy that personally works best for me with these claw nails. They're kind of an awkward thing to file down because they curve in a way that I'm not personally used to working with, but I think I like the system. Anyway, this nail I had some gapping as well, so I just add in a little bit more of that builder gel. Then I smooth it out as best I can before popping it back into the light to fully cure. And then I just file down the sidewalls once more before going in and reshaping that curvature, just enough to make it match the other edge. And then once you're all done with your filing, you want to go ahead and wipe away any dust. And now we can finally get to the surface art, all of the surface painted details. So to start with, I pull out my crisp palette again, and I'm just taking a little bit of the white and putting it on a separate disposable palette because I'm actually going to create an ombre on the pinky finger. So I'm pulling out a mushroom sponge from Dayami. I really like the mushroom sponges. I think they're great for aura nails. And I'm just gonna blend that white color out from the cuticle end to the free edge. I do this in 3 layers just because I wanted a good amount of opacity up near the cuticle. And once that's all done, I'm sealing that in with a top coat. This is the Yogo Zombie top, and it's a really nice thick consistency. I wanted to seal everything in first because I want the next step to be very 3D, and so I don't want to have to top coat over it. I'm taking that black cherry color and I'm mixing it with some of the Yogo Zombie top. I just wanted something a little bit thicker than the Yogurt Nail Korea gel on its own. Now, trypophobia warning, skip to the next chapter if that freaks you out, but I'm just taking a liner brush and I'm dipping that into my mixed gel and then just dotting that on the surface of the nail, really making sure to add a lot of it in some places to get those nice juicy blood bubbles. Sounds really gross, and it kind of is, but hey, you know what? It's Halloween. 'Tis the season. Another reason I wanted to mix that red with the clear is to make sure that the light could penetrate all the way through these layers and fully cure the gel. In fact, I went over with a second layer just to add more of a 3D effect, make those bubbles pop even more. and I'm super pleased with how it turned out. I think it looks great. And so we are on to the pointer finger. I skipped over the other ones for now because I already had this mushroom sponge out. And an easy way to get a really nice, even, thin coat of paint on a nail is actually just to sponge it on. So I did that here, fully cured it, and then I go in and I'm hand painting the design on her robe. I'm using that cosplay as a reference, but I believe these are supposed to be chrysanthemum flowers, which actually are a big part of Chinese culture in the fall and autumn and are heavily featured in the Mid-Autumn Festival, which, by the way, if you celebrate, happy Mid-Autumn Festival. Now, I was adopted, so unfortunately I'm not as in touch with my roots as I would like to be, but I do remember my parents always getting us mooncakes around this time of the year to celebrate. They really try their best to help me and my sister kind of like connect with our roots. And honestly, I think it shows because now more than ever, I feel like I'm learning more about my heritage. I have a very deep appreciation for the art styles from China, and obviously I really like Korean Japanese styles of nail art. And so it's a little bit tricky for me. I never want to appropriate, but I do really appreciate different art styles, and I hope it comes off more as appreciation rather than appropriation. So I finish up with that design here, give it a full cure, and then I go in with a matte top coat because I want it to be matte like fabric would be. This one is the Yummy Matte Top. I picked it because I knew it was super smooth, very silky, and so I paint on a nice even layer. And it is a white matte top coat, so you do need to cleanse the tacky layer after you're done. But after all of that's wiped away, I then take a liner brush with more of that black cherry color. And as you can see, I'm very quickly flicking it over the surface of the nail to create these blood splatters. The good news is the jerkier you are with your movements, the more natural this will actually look. So feel free to wiggle around as much as possible. And once I'm done with the blood, I do give it a full cure and then wipe away the tacky layer. Unfortunately, it does not dry non-wipe, so I do go in with just a thin top coat and just isolate it over those areas of blood. This brings out the luster, the shine, and makes it look nice and wet again. I swear the audio, if taken out of context, makes me look like a serial killer, but it's just Halloween nails, what can I say? So then I take that same top coat and I top coat the underside, and now I'm going in for the ties. I got this string from Michaels, it's perfect, and I just cut 2 pieces for either side of the tie, and then I constructed the tie actually by gluing it together. So I just took some gel glue, and I'm attaching one end to a palette just as an anchor point, and then I'm gonna loop it around itself once, as you can see here, press it into a little bit of that gel glue to kind of hold it in place, and then try to loop it one more time to create that nice little bow shape. Knot tying to me is such a beautiful art. I really want to order from this one creator on Instagram. She has amazing Chinese knot charms. Unfortunately, she sells out so fast. I tried to get one her last release and they were gone in seconds. So I might have to make my own, we'll see. But I repeat that process one more time, just looping in the opposite direction for the other side of the nail. And once the glue is all cured, you can peel it off the palette and then glue your little knot right onto your nail. This honestly worked out a lot better than I had hoped for. If I were to do it again, I would maybe just make the loops a little bit smaller and make the bow a little bit lower on the nail. But I tied together a little loop at the end. I didn't want to go for a traditional bow because it stuck out too much on the sides. So I just made a loop and cut off the excess, and I think it looks pretty cool. So now that the pointer finger's done, we can go back to the ring finger. I'm just top coating it here before adding the surface elements. I feel really bad that I wasn't able to record the embedding process. I swear I was recording, but I basically just glued the flower to the nail tip, filled the dual form, and then just smushed them together and cured it. I'm taking the Gina nail oil paints, this time in the black, and I'm just painting on the tendril vine veiny things. I'll try to put the reference image in the corner. These start spreading from the mist monster, and wherever they are you have the spider lilies blooming, so I thought it would be the perfect combination here. And while I liked the black, I did want to bring in the red, so before curing it I just took the red Gina nail oil paint that we used earlier and just kind of mixed it in with that black so that you got some areas of darkness and some areas with a little pop of red. And then after curing that, I felt like I had a little bit too much blank space on the nail, so something in me decided I wanted to do some Japanese lettering, So I tried to look up the kana for me, as in like I, myself. Without spoiling too much, the character must make a choice between 3 options: me, a fox, and a partner. So I just wanted to represent that on the nails. I really hope this is the correct character. If you do know Japanese, please let me know. I would love to have somebody to consult with on things like this before I put it on the nail. But onto the next nail, I'm going in on the middle finger and just top coating everything to then add my 3D elements on top. So I'm using that burgundy from before, and this time I'm using the Gina Nail liner brush. It's like a nice thicker liner brush that I honestly think makes really good petal shapes. And so I'm just painting on some petals on the surface to match the ones that I had embedded in the nail. And we're actually finished with this one, so I popped it into cure, and our last nail is the thumbnail. So I'm taking one of those sculpted spider lilies and I'm just gluing it onto the surface of the nail. I'm not top coating this one yet because I will need to top coat this spider lily into place. So I'm just using that IV Fix gel, flash curing it into place, making sure that it lays nice and flush, and then I go in and do the same for the mask. In hindsight, I'm actually glad that I didn't end up embedding the mask. I do think it looks really cool on top of the nail so you can see all of the 3D elements and the overall shape of it. Now, I did top coat it at this point, and that's because I forgot that I wanted to add the lettering. So don't do that if you're doing this design, if you want to replicate it. Which, by the way, I love seeing people inspired by my art, so please absolutely tag me if you ever are. It would make me so happy to see it. But I am going in with a thinner top coat just over the spider lily. I really don't want any of those edges sticking out to catch on anything. And then I take that thicker zombie base on a liner brush and I'm just going around the edges of the fox mask just to make sure I'm filling up any gaps. And then because I'm an incurable perfectionist, I went in and did a little bit more shading on the face. I lightened up the bridge of the nose and the forehead, and then I also darkened the eye areas with some dark brown and some black. And honestly, I'm pretty happy I did this. I think it added just more contrast, really drew attention to the contours of the face. And then at that point, I'd remembered I'd wanted to do the lettering, so I'm writing out fox and partner. Again, very much open to critique. Please help me. I really hope I picked the right versions of these words. And I am painting with the Crisognineri pat gels. They're so pigmented, so they're really good for lettering. Although they are a little bit thick, so you can thin them out a little bit if you prefer a slightly runnier gel, specifically for painting with. But it's time for one more top coat to just seal in all of that lettering, and then I do want the mask to be matte as well. So I used a slightly thinner matte top coat, the Devox Zero Matte, instead of the Yummy Gel. This one is a non-wipe matte top coat, which means I didn't have to try to get into those grooves and cleanse the tacky layer. And with that final step, we are actually done with this design. I'm super happy with how it turned out. I think that I achieved my vision. There were definitely some things I learned about embedding and making sure that the elements are small enough, but that's honestly what I love about YouTube and making content, is that I can do experimenting and I can share with you all and feel like it's worth it, like I've learned something, like I can help. I know claw nails aren't for everybody, so I will be returning to some normal nail shapes soon. I just couldn't help it for this design. I think claws are so integral to the game itself, so it really was a thematic choice as well. Along with, it's Halloween, you can't go wrong with a claw nail design on Halloween. But let me know down in the comments below your thoughts on the nail set, on the game. Have you played it? Do you have any interest in playing it? Do you have any other favorite horror games? I'd love to hear it. And hey, if you want to tag Konami, that would be awesome too. All of the products I used today are linked in the description, along with my discount code. You can use Get Pressed to save 10% from Sweetie Nail Supply and support me. They're also running a Halloween contest right now if you want to go check out their page and enter into that. I also have a Discord with a really great community of nail artists if you are interested in joining. That is linked in the description as well. But thank you as always for being here. If you are already subscribed, I really appreciate it. If you aren't, please consider doing so if you like these sorts of tutorials, nail art guides, and nail hauls. But as usual, I think I've talked enough. So with that, I hope you are having a wonderful day, and I will see you all for the next one. Bye. Smuggy, you want to say hi? Say hi, YouTube. He says no. Put me down. Okay.